Israel's parliament passes a law allowing prisoners to be force-fed. But many Palestinian detainees say a hunger strike is the only weapon they have to defend their dignity and their rights. Is force-feeding a form of torture or a way to keep prisoners alive? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Abougaida. Hunger strikes have become an important form of protest for Palestinians who are detained in Israeli prisons. But the Israeli parliament has just passed a new law which would allow authorities to force-feed prisoners on hunger strike. The United Nations, the Palestinian Prisoners Commission and Israel's Medical Association all condemning force-feeding, calling it inhumane. But Israel says it's worried that hunger strikes by Palestinians in its jails could lead to their deaths and spark waves of protests. Well, right now there are 2 prisoners on hunger strike in Israel. One has been refusing food for 12 days, the other for 43. And they're just 2 of 6,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails. Around 400 of them have been detained without charge. They're the ones most likely to use hunger strikes to demand release or trial. Now, that figure has doubled in the past year. There have been 26 mass hunger strikes in the history of the Palestinian prisoner movement. Stephanie Decker has more from West Jerusalem.
It was 35 years ago, but Abdurrahim still remembers exactly what it felt like.
They tied me down and brought a tube, shoved it down my nose and pushed. I felt my head exploding down to my stomach. There's nothing you can do to resist. Our stomachs were empty. It hurt. Then they did it again.
He was part of a communal hunger strike in Israel's Nafha prison in 1980, protesting against prison conditions. Some were force-fed, and 2 men died because liquid got into their lungs. That was the last known case of force-feeding, but that could now change. Force-feeding is a controversial issue, but it's just become law after a successful vote in the Israeli parliament. It passed with only 6 votes, far from a majority, but it's still being challenged, most crucially, by members of Israel's medical community. This is a social media campaign by Physicians for Human Rights. These doctors say they will never follow any law which tells them to force-feed prisoners. Yoel Duchin is one of them.
The discussion in the parliament should not be whether it's to save life or not. The discussion should not be whether it's dangerous or not. The discussion should be whether it's ethical, whether you can demand from a physician to do something which is completely against his belief, against his religion, against his medical ethics.
We put that question to Yael Haddad, who is part of the team that drafted the bill.
Our law is not about force-feeding, but about medical treatment. We want it to be provided as necessary. It will be at the doctor's discretion. We will not force the hand of any doctor. Thereby, they will of course not begin with force-feeding, but rather with lighter treatment. If they will need to force-feed, then it will only be after they come to the medical conclusion that it will save the patient's life.
Back in Abdurrahim's home, he says there will be little prisoners can do if they are force-fed.
They have to take it. They have to be patient. Resistance has so many facets. I don't expect mercy from the enemy. It has been 35 years and 5 days since then.
He says force-feeding is not about saving lives, but about breaking spirits. And whereas he's managed to put those days behind him, for other prisoners, force-feeding has just become part of their future. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem, for Inside Story.
Before we introduce our panel, let's speak with James Turpin. He's the acting head for the United Nations Human Rights Office, joining us from Ramallah. Thanks very much for being with us on Inside Story. So this is an issue that the UN has urged Israel to stop. You must be disappointed with this law.
Well, we are certainly disappointed that the law has gone ahead. The independent experts that spoke earlier this week made it quite clear that they had grave concerns about this law, and those concerns are shared by our office.
And what are the concerns?
And we believe that there may be better ways to deal with this issue. Well, the concerns relate to the right to health and the prohibition against ill treatment and torture. and their concerns were set out in a statement which said that they felt that under certain circumstances, force feeding can violate these rights. In particular, the need for informed consent by anyone receiving medical treatment, which would include force feeding.
When you say that there might be better ways to deal with this issue, what exactly do you mean by that? Which other ways?
Well, I think it's important to understand why this bill has come onto the agenda now. There are a number of detainees in Israeli prisons who are protesting against violations of their human rights. In particular, the issue of administrative detention. This is an issue which the UN has spoken out about as well on several occasions. And really the point should be that the issue of force feeding shouldn't arise because we should be addressing the actual grievance that these detainees are protesting against. So the issue is really the administrative detention and how to address that problem.
According to one Israeli lawmaker, James, hunger strikes have been used as a tool to pressure and threaten Israel, that's what he says, and make it release prisoners. And this new law allows Israel to prevent a risk to prisoners' lives and prevent them from applying pressure on the state. Your reaction to that?
Well, every human being has a right to peaceful protest. So in these circumstances, the prisoners are exercising their right to peaceful protest. And as I said, the important thing is then to address the reasons why they feel they need to protest. So if the Israeli government would like to address the issue of administrative detention, which has been raised, as I said, by the UN on many occasions, it's quite clear how to address that. The prisoners should not be detained without charge. They should be promptly charged or released. And the provisions of due process should be respected.
So when you've raised these issues with the Israeli authorities, what response have you gotten?
Well, unfortunately, there hasn't been a great deal of response. We report very frequently to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly to raise these points, and they are addressed in the fora of the United Nations. Israel, of course, is a member state and is a party to many of the human rights treaties which address these issues as well. So we are here really to be available to address those issues, and we would respond to any requests for assistance from the Israeli government or from any other authority.
How much pressure can be applied on the Israeli government to reverse this decision? And also, James, does this open the door to other countries legalizing laws such as these?
Well, I can't speak about other countries. I mean, we're very much focused here on the issues of the occupied Palestinian territory. I think when it comes to pressure, I think what we would like to do is to engage with the Israeli authorities and, as I said, to really try and address the real issue here, which is the underlying grievances that are leading to this phenomenon of hunger strikes.
James Turpin, we appreciate your time with us. Thank you very much. Let's discuss this. Bring in our panel. Dr. Yoel Donshin is a member of the Israeli Medical Association. He's joining us from West Jerusalem. Sahar Francis is a director at Ad-Damir. That's a prisoner support and HR association group. She's joining us from Ramallah. And over in West Jerusalem, we have Dr. Shimon Glick. He's a medical ethicist. He supports force feeding for humanitarian purposes. Welcome to you all to Inside Story. Dr. Shimon, a hugely controversial issue passed with a slim majority. Your reaction?
Well, I think it is an ethical question, and we have here a conflict of two values. One is human life, and the other is autonomy of the patient and dignity of the patient. And these two have to be weighed one against the other. I personally feel that human life has precedence over the question of dignity. And this has been decided by two cases in Israeli courts. A number of years ago in my department, a Jewish hunger striker was sent to the prison by a court order. And the judge specifically said, in our culture, where there is a conflict between human life and human dignity, human life takes precedence. And a Supreme Court decision a number of years earlier with respect to a man who was pushing drugs and swallowed bags of heroin, and the police wanted to operate on him, and the doctor said if the bags burst, he will die, and he refused. And again, Judge Beisky of the Supreme Court said, we cannot allow a human being to die, and we have to sacrifice his dignity for human life.
When
That's
you
my
talk
feeling.
about the issue of weighing, Dr. Shimon, so are you confident that the Israeli government and the parliament that has now passed this law, are they weighing this issue in the correct way that they should be doing so?
Well, I have never been gifted by the quality of mind reading, and I'm not involved in the actual law.
It's not an issue of mind reading. So Mike, to put a basic question to you, are you satisfied with this decision that was taken?
Yeah, I am satisfied with the decision that was taken. I think there really is no alternative, in my humble opinion.
Dr. Yol, your opinion?
I think that force feeding is a torture. And I think that physicians should not do it from the ethical point of view. As Professor Glick said, there are two values. My value, and this is why I joined the Physician for Human Rights, because physician has other things to do, not just to give anesthesia, but also for the community. So I think that there is no need for a law like this. This is the main point here. And that's what brought us for this discussion. There is no need of the government to issue a law that whenever a patient has a glucose level of something, that that physician will start intravenous infusion. The government cannot issue laws how to treat patients.
But is it a way to keep prisoners alive, as the government says, Dr. Yol?
I don't have prisoners. I have patients. I am not going to do any harm to the patient against his will, and I'm not going to rape him under the law. I'm not going to insert a tube if he refuses. If the patient is in a grave condition and he is going to die in my department, I have to consider it between my own ethical values and the patient values and the family response, not by any law that politicians who get 30 votes or 40 votes decided for me what to do to my patient. And there is no need for a law like this. So the law is stupid, and the people who are working to and raising this issue did not do it because they are going to fight the Palestinian, or they are going to do some humanistic values. They do it because they need propaganda, and this is beyond and above any medical issue. It's not have nothing to do with the Hippocratic Oath, and nothing to do with my values as a physician facing a patient.
Okay, let's bring in Sahar Francis.
There will be a law and they will get some votes and propaganda, but it has nothing to do with medicine.
Okay, Sahar Francis, why is it that Israel decided to make this into law now, when force feeding is actually something that has been practiced, as we heard at the top of the program? It has been applied on Palestinian prisoners.
Yes, actually, first let me start by saying that I think the Israeli initiative of legislating such a law is not coming to protect the lives of the prisoners, because why they are attacking them by shooting them and in the process of the arrest, or inside the prisons using ways of violence that cause death of prisoners. If they want to save their lives, they should keep their rights. Prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, going on in hunger strike because they want to guarantee their basic rights inside the Israeli prisons. They are opposing the use of administrative detention, not because they want to suffer or they want to torture themselves. The opposite. This is a tool that would be used by the prison system. In the Israeli history, they used force feeding in the past, and it caused death of Palestinian prisoners. So there was a ruling by the High Court that they cannot use force feeding, and actually this is why they initiated this time this law, in order to do it legally, that they can use the force feeding as a tool legalized by a law. And then it will be very hard for us as lawyers and human rights organizations to oppose and face such systems.
Dr. Yol, the ethical Dr. Shimon, forgive me, the ethical implications for doctors and the legal implications are what, in your opinion, at this point?
Well, first of all, I reject the concept that putting a nasogastric tube into a patient is torture. As a medical student, we did it to ourselves. As patients, we do it to ourselves. So to think that putting a nasogastric tube is more torture than allowing a prisoner to starve himself to death over several weeks, I think is almost absurd. So I think here we have to separate the political issue. And I don't deny that legislators who passed this law have a variety of motives, many of them political. I don't happen to be in the right wing politically, so I'm not accused of being one of those. But I think I have certain feelings about saving human life, even of opponents. And I think it's interesting to note in which countries and in what situations have prisoners, fasting prisoners, been allowed to die. Turkey allowed hundreds of Kurds to die in the prison. During the apartheid regime, they let hundreds of blacks die. And Margaret Thatcher famously allowed about a dozen Irish hunger strikers. And Yvette Lieberman of the right wing said, let the Palestinians starve to death. That's not my position. I think we have to protect even of prisoners and criminals, we have to prevent them from dying. We don't let prisoners commit suicide. Never. If a prisoner commits suicide in prison, the whole country goes up in arms. Why not? It's his autonomic right.
You mentioned other countries a moment ago, which we'll talk about, but let me just ask you one question here, Dr. Yol, since you said that you reject that this is a form of torture. So you must also reject when the ICRC, the World Medical Association, and the UN all say that they recognize the right of prisoners of sound mind to go on a hunger strike. They say force feeding is labeled as a violation on the ban on it's cruel, it's inhumane, and it's degrading punishment. So you don't agree with that, Dr. Shimon?
I don't agree with that. That is correct. I think, first of all, I think feeding them should not be done in prison. They should be transferred to a hospital under the care of compassionate physicians who have nothing to do with the prison or with the political situation. And I think in those cases, in most cases, they will be treated. And if they have a nasogastric tube, it has to be passed. It will be passed not as a torture, but as a form of treatment.
Okay, well, Israel, as we're saying, just legalized force feeding in prisons, but this practice not new, as we're mentioning. It goes as far back as 1909. That's when women's rights activists in England used hunger strikes at the time as a political tool. The so-called suffragettes were force-fed until a law in 1913, which instead temporarily released prisoners who tried to starve themselves. Force feeding, though, in Britain did continue. 1917, an Irish Republican named Thomas Ashe died. That's because of complications from the practice. Then there's the most widely reported case, Guantanamo Bay. American military officials have acknowledged that they forcibly fed 20 prisoners in 2005. Even the United Nations was on board until recently. The UN authorized the force feeding of a Serbian war crime suspect in 2006. That's after a doctor said the politician was about 15 days away from starving to death. But the UN has since condemned force feeding, calling it inhumane and degrading. Seeing as the United Nations did that, Sahar, did the UN itself commit torture, or what some people are referring to as torture?
I'm not sure if we can say yes, but according to the international standards, degrading treatment and ill treatment and forcing treatment is amount to torture. So this is why we assume that it should be banned.
Dr. Yol, a lot of organizations have come out and they've spoken against this law that's been passed in Israel. Can enough pressure be put on Israel to reverse this decision?
To put pressure is also political. And I don't think that we have to fight too much against a stupid law that could not be enforced on any physician. If a physician like Professor Glick, who cannot see his patient dying, not a prisoner, a patient, Jewish, Arab, does not matter, ideological strike, he cannot see him dying, based on his ethical values, he will feed him, he will start an IV, and there is no law in the world that can tell him to do it or not to do it.
Okay, I suppose it's important, Dr. Yol. Let's just stop for a second.
And there is an order or a law. You have to feed.
Okay, let me ask you this. To what extent is the prison doctor or any Israeli doctor involved in this decision-making process when it comes to a particular prisoner who's on hunger strike?
Look, in America, the American Medical Association condemned any physician that will participate in execution of a prisoner by injecting a lethal injection. So I think in Israel, if the Israeli Medical Association, based on its ethical committee, will say don't do it, then we will not do it. If a single physician will feel that his obligation to the patient is to save his life, he will save his life. And if the law is like this, he will go to prison or will be punished or not. I don't think that you can issue laws against the ethical regime of physicians. It's absurd, and to fight against this, the government just want us to fight against this, like the left doctors are against the righteous physician. It's not like this.
Is that the case, Dr. Shimon? Is that what the government aims to do here? Pit doctors against one another?
No, I think Professor Yoel is right. This will be an individual physician's decision, and some physicians agree with the position of the Israel Medical Association. By the way, the Israel Medical Association came out with what seems to me a very contradictory ruling. They took full-page ads in the newspaper and said, we oppose physicians force feeding. However, if the patient loses consciousness, we will feed him. Now, this to me is absurd because it's the same violation of autonomy after the patient loses consciousness. And if you wait until the patient loses consciousness, he will have suffered irreversible neurological damage, which will be a real tragedy. So I think a physician in the prison have to make a decision after a certain number of days. Patient is in danger, send him to the hospital and let him be treated as a patient, not as a prisoner. And it turns out there are data in the literature that prisoners who've been force-fed and survived have thanked the people who fed them.
Sahar, what do you make of that statement by Dr. Shimon? And also, tell us how much information is available to you as an organization when it comes to how many Palestinian prisoners are on hunger strike, how many of them are being force-fed, and what the Israeli authorities are saying when they are actually, when a hunger striker is being force-fed. Do you get that information?
I think first it should be highlighted that for us the force fed is a tool actually to legalize oppression against the prisoners, and this is how the Palestinian political prisoners will see it inside the Israeli prisons, not as saving their lives. So I'm not sure that there would be one single Palestinian prisoner that he decides to get in a hunger strike to oppose administrative detention that is violating seriously his right for freedom based on secret information, would be happy to be force-fed against his will. And for the information, currently there's 2 prisoners under hunger strike. Of course, one of them is administrative detainee and the other is a Jordanian citizen that he's demanding to be transferred back to Jordan. And both of them, I'm not sure if they will be using the new law against them or not. Usually we get the information from our visits, daily visits to the prisons. In the past, there was more detainees under hunger strikes, especially last year. The administrative detainees, more than 130, they went in a hunger strike for more than 63 days, demanding their freedom and ending the policy of administrative detention. So I think the main issue here is not a political, it's a right-based issue. These prisoners, they should deserve the minimum treatment according to the international standards of prisoners, which the Israeli prison system is violating systematically on daily basis. And this is what drives these prisoners to go in a hunger strike.
Sahar Francis, Dr. Yoel Donchin and Dr. Shimon Glick all joining us. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. We're always keen to hear from you and your thoughts. You can always get in touch via our program page on aljazeera.com. You can post your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From myself and the whole team here in Doha, bye-bye for now.